future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future...
Mission of Universal Broadcasting Network.
Welcome to the National Safe Child Show, addressing the health, welfare, and safety of all children.
Hi folks, welcome to the National Safe Child Show. Thank you for joining us today. We have an unbelievable show today. We have a fabulous guest here, a former DCFS worker, former meaning last week he retired. This is Jerry Dominguez, and he has a lot of great information to share with us. We are going to put him on the hot seat with some questions, and he has been more than happy to provide answers to parents. He's really concerned about the system, what's happening in it. He has a lot of colleagues with his 20-year background with DCFS. Additionally, he has I'm going to let you take the stage for a moment and give the listeners some information on your credentials. We'll start there and introduce yourself.
Well, Tammy, let me start by thanking you for allowing me to be here to talk to you today about these issues. I care deeply about these issues. I'm very passionate about this subject. I just recently ended a career with the Los Angeles County Department of Child and Children's Services that spanned over 18 years. During that time, I worked in several different line functions as an emergency response worker, a family maintenance and family reunification worker, and a pendency investigator. And I also created a program and worked in other specialized programs. Additionally, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I have created and I conduct trainings for child welfare agencies and other support agencies. So I have a lot of experience with these topics in the field. And I also recently wrote a book with my co-author, Melinda Murphy. The book is entitled A Culture of Fear, an inside look at Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. In that book, we chronicle a lot of serious issues that are impacting Department of Children and Family Services. And I'm sure during the course of the show today, we'll be talking about a lot of those issues that are near and dear, not just to me and my colleagues, but to our entire community. Issues concerning child abuse and neglect touch all of us in some way. We are all part of communities that have to deal with and address our very, very broken system.
Okay. Well, we're gonna dive in because I know that there's a lot that we need to cover, and I know that we're not going to have enough time, so I want to try to address everything. And we're going to move this a little bit just to avoid any static. Sometimes it's a little bit better. Okay. Where do we begin? Okay, so, and I took a lot of notes, folks. False reporting. False reporting seems to be something, not seems to be, it is something that parents continuously are up against. They meet with social workers come to them, and there's one situation according to the parent that happens, and all of a sudden, what's actually written is a whole different scenario than what the parent recollects transpired. And they're really concerned, and they go into court, and they're appalled that the social worker is lying like this, but they're seeing it in black and white. We know that it happens. What can we do? What can the parents do? Why does it happen? Let's talk about that for a minute, because it is a big issue.
It's a serious issue, and it's actually an endemic issue throughout the culture. We see it happen over and over again, where social workers, in many cases, aren't allowed to include in reports their findings, things that they see and that they hear, a lot of times information that they determine based on their observations, based on their experience with the families, is omitted or changed based on the instructions of a supervisor, administrator, or manager.
Okay.
It happens so frequently that social workers are frustrated because they're not allowed to include in reports all their findings based on their observations, the facts, and essentially the truth. Quite often, positions are taken about parents and families, and these positions by either a supervisor, an administrator, or a manager dictate what actually goes into a report, and especially the recommendations made in the report. If you were to ask the average social worker what percentage of the time that they are told what they can write and what they can't write and what they have to recommend, they would tell you that it happens as much as 60 to 80% of the time.
Okay.
Well, you can well imagine the problem that creates across the board, not just for the worker who's frustrated when they go to the court and they have to present a report that does not represent their finding, but especially for our families. They go to the court, they read the reports and say, my goodness, this is not what I said. This was not my experience. This is not what occurred. Well, we see that happen over and over again because we have what I refer to in my book, A Culture of Fear. We have ghost authors in many instances.
I want to talk about that because I had never heard about it until you educated me on this. So the social worker meets the parents. For whatever reason, the parent disagrees that this scenario that they see in black and white is written in this report. But you said something that really concerned me. Most of the time, the social worker writes one thing, but there's somebody at the office that intervenes, and this ghost author intervenes and says, no, I don't want that written. Here's what we're going to write, and here's what you're going to sign.
It happens all the time.
Has it happened to you?
Absolutely. During the course of my career, I've been told, just like many other social workers, what you can recommend and what you can't recommend, what you can include and what you can't include in the report.
Would that be, what you can include and what you can't include? What you can't include, might that be the truth?
Absolutely. We see in too many instances, and workers are incredibly frustrated and dispirited because they're not allowed, in most cases, to simply write what they see and hear, to represent the facts that they've observed, essentially the truth, and especially the recommendation. They're told that you can recommend B, but you can't recommend A, and it happens all the time. Yet, they're told when they go into court, they have to represent the report as their own finding. In fact, they're told that they have to swear and testify to that in the court that it's the truth, when in fact they know it is not the complete truth.
Have you done it?
The full truth. Have I been put into that bind? I have been put into the bind where I've had to submit reports that did not reflect the recommendations that I thought were appropriate based on my finding. That's happened.
Were you intimidated? Was your job put on the line? Were you told that you'd be sanctioned if you didn't do this?
Intimidation is part of the culture and part of the experience of social workers. They are told, they are threatened with subordination if they do not go along with what they're being told to recommend or what they're being told to write in reports.
Somebody's asking, can you give some specifics as to what they would be told to write down in reports? Like, give us some scenarios.
There are situations where maybe there was a chemical dependency issue.
Okay.
That may be 2 years old, 3 years old.
And the parent's fine now. The social worker hasn't seen any evidence of them being high or not even being high, but not having the ability to care for their child, because there's a difference. We kind of touched on that. I mean, the whole pot smoking or whatever allegations of substance. If it's not relative to if they can't put the two together, that it's causing a detriment to the child's health, safety, and welfare.
Absolutely, Tammy, and you make an incredibly important point. There's a term we use, nexus, which means connection and linkage.
Right.
If we cannot link the concerns, historical or present, to the actual inability of the caretaker to care for and supervise a child, they should not be relevant in terms of jurisdiction, basically removing the child, and certainly should not provide a foundation for disposition and what the court eventually decides where the child should live and what the caretaker should do. However, what we find is that even in cases where there is no such nexus or linkage between the concern and actual events, we see reports that are written or emphasize the concerns without requiring any actual events or evidence of abuse or neglect. So the courts, they receive these reports and they hear these concerns, a lot of it based on speculation, opinion, or inference. And the courts, because they have this awesome responsibility to ensure the safety in their decisions, whether it's jurisdiction or disposition, oftentimes lean on the reports and the decisions from the department because there is an overwhelming feeling that we need to be conservative in our decisions and to err on the side of caution, which basically means a lot of children are being removed or not being returned in timely manners.
Right. So, ghostwriters.
Ghostwriters. Oh my
goodness. Who are they? What are their titles? Where do they come from? I mean, are they just,
And by ghostwriters, I'm referring to the individuals that instruct and order social workers to write, to omit, to recommend what they feel is appropriate, what they feel makes sense.
How do they come up with these feelings, though?
A ghostwriters, first of all, can be a supervisor, can be an administrator, could be a manager. It could be county council. And that's a topic that we'll talk about and probably need a whole show to talk about it. But there's so much overreach with our county council.
Right.
But you asked, well, where do they come up with these opinions?
Right.
Well, basically, these individuals, at whatever level, they'll take a look at the detention report. They'll take a look at past involvement with Child Protective Services. There'll be a background check, and they'll take a look at a lot of information, and then they'll develop an opinion, a position.
Have they ever met the parent? And
that is a critically important point. In almost every situation, almost without exception, the ghost authors that determine what eventually ends up in a report and eventually decide the recommendations and whether to detain or not, almost in every case never meet the families.
They have no idea who they are.
They have no idea who they are other than what they see in written form. They never meet the caretakers. They never experience the family. They never see the caretakers, in most cases the parents, interact with the children. So the people that are making decisions about the lives of our families and our communities don't have any direct experience with the actual human beings themselves. And this is the most disconcerting point about this whole practice. The social workers, the ones that actually work with the families, meet the children, talk to the children privately, see the interaction between the children and the family members, and most importantly, the caretakers, the parents, oftentimes their findings, their observations are marginalized. They're set aside, and they're substituted for that opinion by these ghost authors, by their impressions, by their speculations, inferences that they draw based on potential implicit bias or explicit bias.
Right.
But not by the facts in many cases, and not by the actual evidence, however much evidence there is or isn't. And this is one of the biggest problems we have systemically with regard to parents that rightly and validly have a concern about being misrepresented in court so that they could have a fair shot at addressing their issues, whatever they are.
Right. I want to touch on, there's so much that we talked about.
There's a lot.
I know. Okay, I want to just educate the listeners about the different levels that we spoke, or the different processes that we spoke about. So we touched on the DI. I was under the impression, just to let the listeners know that there is always a DI with the social worker.
Let me explain the different functions,
Okay.
the timelines,
Yes.
and the process,
Yes.
so that we can clarify that here and for our listeners.
Yes.
It starts with a hotline referral.
Right.
A hotline referral comes in.
Right.
There's a screener. They'll take the information that's being shared to them, usually by an anonymous source, and they'll determine if that information is going to be categorized in one of four ways. It can be categorized as an immediate referral, which means seen by same day,
Okay.
that the information is so disconcerting, such a high-risk situation potentially, that they need to be seen the same day.
Okay.
The second category.
Hey, wait a minute. Now, just let me ask you,
Sure.
these hotline, these first people that are making this connection with this and taking this referral, what is their experience? Is there a certain level of experience that they have to have? Do they need a social work background, or are they just in a call center taking this information?
There are social workers that receive training, receive education.
So they actually are credentialed social workers, each and every one of them.
They are social workers.
Okay.
And they receive training.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. So that's the first.
The second category would be a 5-day referral,
Okay.
which literally means seen within 5 days
By the ER, though, correct?
by the first responders that are called emergency response CSWs
Okay.
when we're talking about DCFS LA County.
Right.
So they have to see the children, the caretakers, within 5 days. That's the second category. The third category is called see-by, where they actually decide on a date certain that the children and the caretakers need to be seen. And there could be a variety of reasons why they may categorize it as a see-by. Maybe the parents or the family is out of town and they're not going to be back for a few days.
Okay.
There's a variety of reasons.
Okay.
The fourth category, that fourth category is EO, evaluate out.
Oh, I really want to touch on
Yes,
this.
and we'll talk about that in
Yes.
some detail.
Did we touch on the IR?
The
Yes.
IR is the first category.
Okay. Immediate.
Immediate response the same day.
Okay. And the EO.
The
maybe.
EO is evaluate out. And
So,
and we'll talk about that.
Yes.
But for now, just to understand that fourth category, an example would be when you have duplicate referrals come in, where there's been an initial referral that shares the same concerns at the same location with the same parties.
okay.
If you get a secondary referral with the same information, it could be tagged EO, evaluate out. There are other reasons why it may be labeled and categorized as an EO.
And I was explaining to you that I see a lot of cases, if I can bring this up, where there has been referrals. The referral comes in. You've got one referral that comes in, and it's regarding physical abuse, folks. Okay, and then we have another referral that comes in, and it comes in a month later, 3 weeks later. For example, it comes in by a mandated reporter. I'm thinking about one specific case that I can bring up here. A mandated reporter calls this referral in. There's concern. That referral got evaluated out, even though it was a direct disclosure from the child to this mandated reporter during a supervised visitation with the parent. So there was no coaching. There was no chance for this to be some false report. But yet, because of the situation, it automatically got evaluated out. The social worker that went to the court and was put on the stand said this evaluating out means that it went to headquarters, and she didn't really know anything about it. Well, the child was in jeopardy. The child disclosed severe corporal abuse, physical abuse. How does that happen? Who makes that determination?
The screener initially will categorize the referral as an evaluate out. However, once it gets to the field, the supervisor has the discretion and the option to read that referral and make a decision. In this case,
Do all the supervisors get a chance to see that?
Absolutely.
Okay,
It goes,
so it does go to...
all the referrals go to the field,
Okay.
and they end up at the desk and in the hands of a supervisor.
Okay.
A supervisor over emergency response workers.
Okay.
The supervisors have discretion to decide to upgrade a referral. They can take a EO referral and make it a C-BY, a 5-day. They can make it an immediate, and it's a judgment call based on whatever that supervisor determines when they read that EO referral. They'll use their discretion to make a judgment call.
Okay.
Sometimes we have situations where referrals come in, and even though they may cite a different kind of abuse or slightly different circumstances, they may say, well, there was another referral. The social worker has already gone out, talked to the child, talked to the caretakers, talked to all the collateral contacts that they could based on the information provided, and they're satisfied that they conducted an investigation that addressed any potential harm. So they may take a second referral that's an EO, and even though the information may be different, they may decide, well, we've already gone out and investigated. When social workers go out, they just don't ask about one type of abuse that's cited on
Right,
referral.
they're asking
They'll
about
ask
everything.
about all abuse, because this is
Okay.
their opportunity to see if the child is safe, if the child's being harmed. So they'll ask about physical abuse, sexual abuse, and so on, domestic
Okay.
violence. And maybe that's a situation, I don't know in the specific situation you're referring to, but I do know that is the process, and there
Okay.
is that option.
Well, that should be the process.
That ideally,
should be.
in theory, is the process.
Okay.
That there is a second review once it gets to the field
Right.
by the supervisor.
Okay. I want to touch on Munchausen by proxy.
Munchausen by proxy.
Folks, this is something that is, as we know, has touched many cases. Please explain to the listeners, for those who haven't been affected by this label.
Munchausen by proxy syndrome, also known as child abuse practice, is something that we've seen often in the field. We've seen situations where families have been identified as having Munchausen by proxy, which is basically a situation where you have a caretaker or a parent cause or fabricate symptoms in a child for personal needs or attention. You'll see a parent take a child over and over again for medical attention to hospitals, and it's clear that the child does not have any underlying medical issues other than the symptoms, but the symptoms may be caused by the parent. A Munchausen by proxy, when we have an authentic case, which actually is very rare, we can have a parent that will actually create and fabricate these symptoms, putting the child at risk. We theorize that a parent is doing this for personal needs of attention and other issues. But too often, parents have been labeled as having Munchausen by proxy syndrome when in fact they have legitimate concerns for a child.
Right.
When in fact children, for a variety of reasons, require medical attention or have issues that they can't explain themselves, but they have concerns about the well-being of the child. So they take the child.
I mean, they're the
in.
parent.
They're the parents. They're supposed to do that.
But this never happened before. Your child's sick. You're concerned. You're not the medical professional. Something's going on, whether mentally or physically. There are some symptoms that you're seeing that are not typical for your child's behavior or actions. You're going to take your child to the doctor.
And none of us are doctors. Most of us
unless
are, unless
other
you
than
happen
the
to be a
doctor.
doctor. Yes, most of us are not doctors. So of course, if we have concerns about the child's well-being and we're seeing symptoms and we can't explain it, of course we're going to take them
We have to
into
go
the
to the
doctor.
doctor.
And of course we're going to take them to the doctor a second or third time.
But there's a lot of parents, Jerry. Here's the quagmire. A lot of parents don't. They are taking their child to the doctor. I hate to bring up sexual abuse, folks, but I have a couple of cases that I'm privy to, again, where there were allegations of sexual abuse. Of course you take your kid to the doctor. You're not equipped to be able to address this. That's where you go. And they have taken their children to the pediatrician and brought this up to their pediatrician that this is what the child disclosed. Sometimes only one visit by the parent to the doctor CPS referral, DCFS referral, Munchausen by proxy. I'm like, are you kidding me? And this isn't just an isolated case where a social worker screwed up, or they didn't screw up, but their ghostwriter did. We've got a lot of cases where it's 1 or 2 visits. Of course, we should always, we are pushed, and we know better to go and get second opinions. That's the way that we should do things. It's called, doctors are called practicing physicians. Practicing, folks, being the key word in this context. So, of course, we're going to get a second opinion.
We absolutely need a second and third opinion.
These parents are getting penalized. They're losing their children. They're being labeled with this disorder that, are they even qualified to label? Let's talk about that.
Now you're talking about a symptom of a much greater problem.
Yes.
We have a tendency in our system, in our culture, to pathologize normal reactions of parents, normal behaviors of parents, especially in situations where they're involved with a system like ours. It's very complex and very scary and very difficult to navigate. Oftentimes, normal reactions are mislabeled, mischaracterized, and Munchausen by proxy has certainly been part of that experience with a lot of our parents.
Yes.
You cannot diagnose, you cannot confirm a condition like Munchausen by proxy syndrome
without
without a pattern, an extended pattern over an extended period of a caretaker or parent that has taken their child not once, not 3 times, but taken their child dozens of times over an extended period where there has been no medical finding. To diagnose someone, you need to have a lot of information, you need to understand the behavior over an extended period, and you need to have verifiable evidence that they've not only taken their child, but there hasn't been a medical finding. You certainly can't render a diagnosis because a parent you've talked to has said, I took my child a couple times and I didn't like the outcome, or I disagree with the medical decision. So
the doctor didn't really, this is what I hear a lot. The doctor looked at my child for 2 seconds and said, no, she is fine. We have a call. Let's hold that thought for a moment. We have a call. Hi, caller, are you on?
Hello?
Hi. Caller, if you have volume on in the back, would you turn it down so we can hear you clearly, please?
I did.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Hi, caller. What can we do for you, and who are we with today?
Actually, my name is CMK, and I just happened to pop on to this web, on Facebook, and saw this National Safe Child Show.
Okay, welcome. Do you have questions?
As far as the Safe Child Show, do you deal with a lot of controversial with adoptions?
We do. Maybe you have a question that Jerry, if maybe you have a question, are you an adoptive parent, or have you lost your children and have they been adopted out?
I'm a grandmother, and I lost a grandson through adoption.
I'm sorry. How long ago?
In 2005. He was given up for adoption without father's consent, which would have been my son.
Did the mother give consent?
The mother was at the time underage, so her mother, the biological grandmother, they decided to pretend that she terminated her pregnancy. But really, she turned around and gave the little boy up for adoption through the foster system, lied to the state and social workers in CASA about this child's father's whereabouts.
So the father, your son, had no idea what was going on. And
well, he knew. He knew she was pregnant. He attended several doctor's appointments, went to the ultrasound, but the mother didn't like him, so she made her daughter go away to have an abortion, supposedly.
Okay, but she didn't have an abortion.
She gave him up for adoption. He'll be 9 years old this May.
So your question is, and I'm so sorry.
Father's rights. Father's rights. How could the state of New Jersey, county of Atlantic, how can they do this? How can they prove that they exhausted all their resources to find the father of this child?
Did the father ever petition the court, though?
We will be. It's been several years that this has been going on now, but
So is it still an active case? I mean, is father still fighting, or did father...
We are
Okay.
fighting. We've tried to fight this. We tried to ask nicely to let's do a DNA, and they chose to go on the Dr. Phil show. And Dr. Phil didn't control the environment of the swab test and let them take the swab test on their own at a local place that they knew who the lab tech was. So you see, Dr. Phil didn't show this.
Okay. But your question is, because we have other callers and we are limited for time, father's rights, what can your son do? Is that the question? I don't know if...
My question is how the state can let something like this slide through the cracks. How can they put a child through a foster system and put up for adoption knowing and not doing their due diligence to find a father for this child? How do you give a child up for adoption with not having a...
Right. But can you say without a fraction of a doubt that they didn't do their due diligence? I mean, I know it happens, but in your particular instance...
Yes, I can. I actually can prove... Without a reasonable doubt, they gave this child to a local family where everybody lived as of today. My grandson is living and is still in contact with the biological mother and family. That's what you call deception. Theft by deception. That's kidnapping.
Any recourse, Jerry?
I'd like to first say to the caller that I am deeply sorry for your loss and what you're dealing with. This isn't easy, and oftentimes we minimize the impact on extended families like grandparents like yourself that obviously have a great deal of love for the child and the children and are committed to their welfare and maintaining family connection. So I want to speak to that first. Secondly, the situation you talk about, even though we obviously don't know the specifics of your situation, I can see situations where that has happened.
Yeah.
In fact, I can see situations where it's happened, and we do know where the father is. In fact, they're part of the case.
Yeah.
And children are adopted out.
Anyway,
so we certainly have such a broken system across the country, not just here locally in Los Angeles, that where you can see scenarios like this play out with incredible damage to families. And not just the immediate family, but for generations to come. We have a need to address these systemic issues so that we can start to address situations like the ones you talk about.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I appreciate you calling in, and I appreciate that you haven't given up the fight.
I know.
That you continue it.
That's right.
Can I just add and tell you that as of today, my grandson has been living without a father for 7 years. His adoptive father died when he was 2 years old.
Wow.
So my grandson has been living without a father because he believes his father's dead.
Right.
That to me is...
It's awful, honey. It's awful.
It's terrible.
I know.
But he hasn't lived without your love and concern.
That's
so
right.
keep up the struggle.
That's right.
And fight for that child until you can't fight. The child...
Oh, I will continue to fight. I won't give up.
Thank
Good
you.
for you.
Thank you so much for calling. And you are in our prayers. Keep us up to date if you would.
I will. I sure will. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Boy, this is something that we see happen a lot.
We absolutely do, and we see it across the country.
Yes.
CPS is a broken and failed system throughout the entire country, and we need to address these issues, starting here with Los Angeles County.
And why starting here? You brought up a good point before.
We need to start here because this is the flagship. It is arguably the largest public sector child protective service agency in the world.
In the world, folks. I didn't even know that.
What happens here at DCFS can have ramifications across the country. What we do here sets precedent. The good things that we do and the things where we fail. We need to address these issues, not just for our county, but for our state and throughout the country, so we can start getting these decisions right and avoiding damaging families when our job, when our commitment is to help families through empowerment, not by power and control.
You know, you and I spoke about we're in total agreement in so many areas, and I haven't found an area that we're in disagreement, but I'm looking. You know I am.
You may, but I think we're on the same page.
I know, I do too. I have to say, I do too. Victoria, It's Julian Jerry. I'm not even going to write it. It's Julian Jerry. That's his middle name. Which name do you prefer to go by, Jerry?
Jerry is fine.
Okay. Julian is fine.
If you happen to purchase the book, it's under the author Julian J. Dominguez, my legal name, as well as my co-author Melinda Murphy.
Okay. But friends,
colleagues call me Jerry.
Okay. So Jerry it is, because he is certainly a friend to be here today. And so if I'm going to address you as Jerry, and I like it. Okay, Munchausen, I want to stay on that for a moment. Jerry, somebody brought something up. There was a mom in LA. She disclosed a disclosure of abuse. She was instructed to go to this hub. Maybe you're familiar, okay, to have her children looked at. They used her visit to the hub that was not anywhere in proximity to her residence. She'd never heard of this place, had never visited this place. However, they used her visit to this hub as a means to label, once again, falsely, this Munchausen. She has had 2 children taken away, and she has been fighting this battle for, I don't know if it's a year and a half. I mean, it's horrific. She was instructed to go there, and then the label was given. What can she do? What recourse do these people have? Give us some instruction. Help these families out. And I'm not talking about the families that consistently, and they're out there, that consistently take their children looking, doctor shopping, looking for somebody to diagnose. But the families that, like this woman, just followed the directives, not knowing what to do, and then was literally held hostage, and their children too.
We certainly have parents that doctor shop. That certainly goes on. But in cases that you're talking about regarding
she wasn't doctor shopping.
this poor mother who wasn't doctor shopping. In fact, she simply followed the instruction of the system that told her to go have your kids examined. And then to have it used against her,
yes,
and to have it used as a basis to label her as having Munchausen by proxy syndrome is absolutely maddening and disturbing and unconscionable.
And wrong, isn't it?
It's ethically wrong, and we see that happen, where even when parents follow instructions, it may eventually be used against them to build a case to substantiate allegations that are brought forth against the parents. What parents can do and should do and need to do is to find their own mental health practitioners, medical practitioners, to get that second opinion that they can document and provide that to the court, so that they have some way of seeing a different point of view that may have more objectivity than the department themselves.
Are they forced to follow? Okay, they go in, the social worker gives a directive. Are they forced to follow these directives? And if they don't, is that then held? I mean, it's almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. In some instances, in some of these cases, in several. What if they don't follow the directives? I don't want to go to this hub.
It is such a precarious situation for our families, because if they follow it, sometimes it can be used against them. If they do not follow the recommendations, even if they're not court orders, that will be used against them, and they'll be called. It'll be labeled as being uncooperative, not following instructions.
And then they're screwed. They're done.
And then, of course, the implication is that they don't care about their children. They're not concerned about their welfare, and they have no interest of complying with the court orders. Which obviously is not the case in the situation I just talked about.
Right.
Social workers sometimes are damned if they do, and parents are sometimes damned if they do and damned if they don't. And it is a very frustrating, frightening, and puzzling situation for a lot of our families and a lot of our parents who are desperately trying to comply with everything they're being asked to do, because they miss their children. They're terrified that their children are separated from them and their families, and they want to do everything they possibly can to reunify or to avoid the removal of their children. But the system oftentimes is stacked against them.
Right. You brought up a great point, and I want our listeners to really listen. It's so hard to meet people that are just getting in the system, but we need to pass this advice out that Jerry's about to give. You said when the social worker comes and this whole process goes and you're going to go to court, what should the parent do? What must the parent do?
It's really important that the parent understands how to navigate the system, especially when they go into court or when they talk to social workers. I would highly recommend that you record everything you share with a social worker.
In other words, you're meeting with the social worker. Have a recorder, folks.
Have a recorder. It is your right to have a recorder.
Now, what if the social worker says, it's against our policy? What can they say to that?
The social worker actually can't say that because it is not against our policy.
Okay, folks, it is not against the policy in Los Angeles County to record the social worker. But what, we just have to let them know?
You have to inform them.
That's it.
And let them know that you're going to record it. Oftentimes, statements are taken in the home of the parent. They certainly have a right to record anything that occurs in their home. I would not only record the information, but I would document very carefully everything that happens, recording the date, the time, the subject matter, the response from the social worker, and anyone else involved in the system, so that there is an accurate record of everything that transpires. Because when you go to court, when you work with your attorney, you want to be able to provide all this information in the event you happen to encounter reports or statements that are inconsistent with the facts and the truth.
Right.
For reasons that we've talked about
yes.
In this show, and we'll probably talk more about.
Of course.
So you want to be able to combat the potential of fraudulent, misleading, or fact-poor
deceiving
information you may find in reports. And it certainly has happened and will continue to happen until we change this practice.
That's right.
I would challenge Los Angeles County Department of Child and Family Services to implement policy that states very simply and very clearly, any individual, ghost author or otherwise, that has any undue influence on a report or statements, they must now sign and take responsibility, full responsibility for whatever they instructed and ordered, including information in the report and especially the recommendations. And they also must allow the social worker to recuse themselves, to remove themselves as the actual author, if it does not reflect their findings and if they're not allowed to make recommendations based on their findings. These poor social workers have to go into court and represent reports that oftentimes are inconsistent with their findings and what they know to be the truth and the facts based on their interaction with families. Let's create that policy that removes the social worker if they are not actually the author or the ones that make the recommendations.
Right.
If you were to make this change, Tammy, and if you were to implement this policy, we would see this practice stop almost overnight, because those ghost authors would realize very quickly, oh my goodness.
No, I'm in the hot seat.
I'm in the hot seat. I've got to go to court, and I've got to explain to a judge in the world
why I made this
determination, even though I've never met the family.
Right.
I've never seen the child. I've never seen the child interact with the parents. They're going to have to explain that. I assure you, when that happens, you will see it stop,
a great change,
or slow down significantly.
Okay. That's a good thing, because we need to see that change. So, folks, we need to implement this. This is important. Let's hold them accountable. You know, you're writing something. Don't be afraid to put your name. Don't be a cowardice or a coward. Put your name down. Be proud of your writing.
And let's stop using social workers as essentially human shields.
Right.
We've done this too long. And social workers care deeply, work hard.
Not all of them. I've got to say, for the sake of my listeners, because I've met, and you and I discussed this, there are some great social workers, and there are some bullied, traumatized social workers who do bully.
Let me restate that.
Okay.
Of course, we have a percentage that should never have been social workers.
That's right. We have good and bad in everything.
And for a variety of reasons, probably shouldn't be social workers now.
Right.
But the overwhelming majority,
the good
I
ones,
can say, care deeply, work incredibly hard, are talented and frustrated, and feel handcuffed because of the system and practices like ghost authoring and human shielding. They're absolutely frustrated and dispirited. and they're desperate for these changes so that we have a system that's functional, not for 100%, because like you said, Tammy, there's going to be a few bad apples in every bunch, especially when you have a system that has thousands of employees. But if we can create a system
Could this be a legislative action?
Absolutely. Legislatively, we need to really tackle this issue. And we need to create a system that allows the overwhelming majority that care deeply and that work hard to be able to provide the kind of service that we want to with our families. So we have the outcomes that we should have with our families when we're tackling an issue as serious as child abuse and the safety of our most vulnerable and our greatest assets in our communities. We need legislation to make these and help us make and impose these changes, because what we know for an absolute certainty is the system does not have the capacity or the ability to self-evaluate.
Right.
That's why we've had this Blue Ribbon Commission that took a year to audit and to assess the Department of Children and Family Services. And what did they find and what did they determine after that year-long auditing? They've concluded, very simply, state of emergency. They
State of emergency, folks.
They state, and I quote, "Of one thing the commission is certain, the children of Los Angeles County must be safer than they are at present.
Yes.
On our watch, many of Los Angeles County's most vulnerable children are unseen, unheard, and unsafe."
Now, do they mean that? You know, a parent might look at that statement. Are they putting that in the context of with their biological families, or are they putting it in the context of the foster parents who they are placed with? Because we have evidence that shows the report that came out in February 12, 2013, these children were put in the foster care system and they were murdered by the very people, strangers, that they were put with to protect them.
Foster care is not a panacea. It's not a solution to address all the issues and problems. Right. While we certainly do have many caring and we have some terrific foster parents, we certainly have the other two.
That's right. And see, with everything, there's good and bad in everything.
There's good and bad, and sadly, the percentages that do go wrong, that are bad, we see some tragic results. We see children that are re-abused. We see children that are harmed again, or that are simply warehoused, because we do have a percentage that are simply having children placed with them for economic reasons, because they have a situation where they need additional income. We certainly have that too.
Yeah, financial incentive
and
provokes a lot of people to go into the foster parent forum.
We have foster parents that go into the field of foster parenting simply for economic reasons and for monetary incentive. We certainly have that percentage. And even where we have marginal foster parents that are doing their best but simply really aren't in a place to provide that love and nurturing that kids need, in addition to all the other practical needs, we have a system that has failed to create the mechanisms to screen and monitor and set up expectations that are necessary to assess whether or not children are in a good place. Case in point, the funding that we provide to foster parents, the department asks for no auditing. We have no expectations.
I want to touch on this because you said there has never been a request for an order when it comes to foster parent funding. Is that true?
We, to my knowledge and experience, and with every social worker I've ever talked to after being in the system for 18 years, we have never asked, demanded, or expected an accounting of the funding they receive that supposedly, in theory, goes for the needs of the child. We ask for no accounting.
So these foster parents take this money. You don't know if they're off blowing it on a shopping spree, a cruise, tying the kids up, starving the children, and we've heard these stories, or taking care of them. We don't know.
We just don't know for certainty, and while we do know there are great foster parents that clearly use the money in the best interest of the child, there's also the other that exists.
That's right.
And that's the problem, is that
there's no accountability.
We ask for no accountability. We ask for no auditing. There is no paper trail, so there's no way to determine if the money is being used. And social workers in the field are frustrated by this too, because they see the child, they talk to the child or children, and they see that, hey, they still have needs that money can address, but money isn't being used in support of their needs and best interest. We see this happen over and over again, and there's no way to tell a foster parent or to say, hey, we have this expectation, and if you don't use the money, we're going to cut off the funding.
Right.
That mechanism does not exist. So we almost invite misuse and abuse because we don't even have the expectation.
Okay, here's a question that one of the guests in the chat room just said. Jerry, is there a way for parents to get their version of events, of the actual events according to them, into the CPS case file and or to contest errors or omissions? How can a parent do that? Your hands are tied. What recourse do they have? They need some help, Jerry.
When allegations are made, and allegations drive the jurisdiction and disposition of a child or children, when you see those allegations, and you'll see them at the detention hearing in the petition, the parent has a right, and you actually want to take the time to do what you can to talk with neighbors, friends, faith-based groups, whoever you are connected with in your community networks, as well as the professionals, to speak to any information that's inconsistent in those allegations. If the allegation is chemical dependency, substance abuse, well, talk with friends, neighbors, extended family members, doctors that you may go to if you're in counseling. Get statements from these individuals that can rebut information in the allegations if it is in fact untrue. If it in fact it is an exaggeration, if it's based on speculation or an inference that was drawn by a ghost author or someone else.
Right.
So parents certainly have the right, and you certainly want to take the opportunity to talk to everybody that you know, professional,
Right.
familial, and in your communities.
Anybody
so that
that
you can
can
share the other point of view that may represent the truth and the facts with regard to who you are and
That's
your
right.
character and who you are as a parent especially.
That's right. When a social worker knocks at the door, do our parents, any parent, are you forced to let them come into your home?
Parents can demand a warrant. You don't have to let anybody into your home. You can say, do you have a warrant? Now, oftentimes...
Should they say, do you have a warrant?
This is a judgment call
Yeah.
on the part of the parent, and it's not an easy situation or answer, and it's not a black and white situation. A lot of times parents feel compelled to answer and allow the individual to walk in because they're afraid. They're terrified, as any of us would be.
And they think that they have to, actually. They don't know that you have the right to not let anybody that you don't want in your house in your house.
You absolutely have the right to refuse.
Yes.
You absolutely have the right to demand a warrant and to examine the warrant. Absolutely. It's a judgment call on a case-by-case basis, and you make that determination in the moment. If you have any doubt, any suspicion, any concern that the individual or the situation will not reflect the truth and the facts, then by all means refuse, ask for a warrant, or say, can we meet at a different time? I'd like to have somebody present. Can we meet at a time when I can have representation? Can we meet at a time in a different situation that's a neutral situation? I understand you have concerns about my child. My child is safe. My child is okay. And I fully want to cooperate, but I want to do so in a way that I feel comfortable with, that I know will represent the facts and the truth. Therefore, can we do A, B, and C to ensure that the facts and the truth will be represented?
Right.
They can certainly make those requests, have that discussion with the person at the door.
What about if they have that bully, and we know that they exist, the bully social worker who says, listen, I'll take your kid right now. You have a choice. Those intimidating people that...
Intimidation is going to happen with some social workers, absolutely. The majority will not be intimidated. The majority will not be intimidating. The majority realize that if they were in those situations, that they would also be frightened, terrified.
Right.
The workers that I've had the privilege to work with understand this, and they know how difficult it is for our families.
Once they're in, I have somebody who's saying once you let them through those doors, you waive your rights. Is that true?
Once you let them in the door, you do not waive your rights. Once they walk through that door, you absolutely have all your rights. And you certainly can still ask for a warrant. You can still record what's being said. You can still ask, what is a concern? This is my situation. This is my experience. These are the facts as I understand them. You can tell them about your kids if you choose to.
Folks, you need to record. I'm looking at a lot here. Jerry knows the policies. He said it doesn't matter what any social worker says. It is not a policy to prevent you from recording your meetings with them. Let them know I'm more comfortable to record. Here is my recording device. And Jerry, it was explaining, not only record, but when you go into court, never be emotional.
And this is an important point.
Yeah.
Oftentimes
Hard to say.
We'll take normal reactions that a parent has, that any of us would have if we were in those situations. We take situations where a parent may be emoting or showing intense emotion, anger, fear, they're upset, they may be argumentative, they may appear irritable. These are all normal reactions when your child has been removed.
Of course.
Or you're afraid your child is going to be
We'd
removed.
give up our lives. That's every good parent. If they see their child in danger, it's an instinct. It's not even an effort. We would give up our lives for our child, and all of a sudden, here it is. Our child is going with a stranger, kicking and screaming and pulling and calling, and we can do nothing. Our hands are tied and we're bound and we're gagged. And then we now have to go into the courtroom standing straight. We have to talk without emotion.
As hard as it is, as traumatizing as this experience is, when you go to court, it's incredibly important that you find a way to compose yourself. You find a way to separate all the emotions that you're feeling.
Leave them at the
and
door.
to appear as if to the court that you are focused, you are coherent, you are organized.
Yes.
That you are willing to listen and to hear and to be able to act in a way that would present a picture of stability.
And you said, by not doing this, the social workers will?
If you, in fact, become emotional, which is normal and understandable, but if you find yourself being overly emotional, if you find yourself emoting in court, becoming upset, angry, excessively tearful, oftentimes the system, the department will characterize that and pathologize that and may say that, well, there's something wrong with this parent.
They're going to use
Clearly,
it against you.
They're unstable. Clearly, they may be irrational. Clearly, they are not appropriate to handle and take care of the welfare of a child. This is why you want to find every resource to help you process that normal, natural emotions that you would have outside of the court experience, outside of the courtroom. The same is true with the social worker. Some social workers are incredibly empathic and compassionate and understand that normal reaction. Others may not. Others may be young. Others may have less experience, or simply maybe not have the skills, or be shut down themselves because of the damage that's occurred to them because of the work. For whatever reason, it's better to err on the side of caution. And the way you compose yourself in court, I would highly recommend you do the same with the social worker.
In other words, folks, when you go into that courtroom, I don't care if you have to bite your lip, don't give them something more. Not that you've given them anything, but for some reason you're in the courtroom, don't let them use something against you based on your action or reaction to whatever it is that they're alleging in the courtroom. Bite your tongue, bite your lip, pinch your leg. I tell parents a lot to take something in that they hold in their hand, a small whatever it is, and to focus on that, because it plays a part in them not focusing on their immediate emotional state. And it helps them.
It absolutely does. And they really want to reach out to family members, extended family, their faith-based communities, their church families for support. This is an incredibly traumatizing situation that's complex and scary. They're going to need support through their process, not only initially, but throughout the entire process. You want to maintain that level of support to help you through this. It would be hard for any of us and scary for any of us.
You know, somebody just said, this is good information. It's unfair, but it's true. Would you agree with that?
It's absolutely unfair, but absolutely true. Until we can address those underlying issues systemically, structurally, parents need to safeguard themselves to the extent that they're able to. And this is one of the areas that I know makes a huge difference from my experience in working with my colleagues and what I've read in reports. You know, you learn very quickly, Tammy, when you start to work for this system, that when you read a report, oftentimes it very seldom reflects the actual human beings. After a while, as a worker, you realize, don't read first. Meet the human beings.
But how many, you know, here we have, I think that there's 7,000 employees in DCFS in Los Angeles, folks, okay? Out of those 7,000 employees, and I hope my memory is going to work well, 78% of them are administrative. That means they never, ever get that opportunity to meet any children. Out of that, 22% of the 100% are out there working in the field in some respect, ER, you know.
And now you speak to the second challenge I make to the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services, my former employer. This would be the second challenge. Probably also we need legislation to push this second challenge. I would like the department, I would challenge the department to create a policy that says that anybody that has any influence in the decision of cases regarding family concerning removal or reunification, that if they're going to be part of that decision in any meaningful way, they must have the obligation and responsibility to meet the human beings first, to minimally meet the caretakers, meet the children, and see them interact. For individuals to have that level of authority, influence, and power over the lives of human beings without having any responsibility to meet the human beings is unconscionable. It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical, and the outcomes are tragic.
Jerry, reasonable efforts. How can a parent compel a social worker to make reasonable efforts before removal? I mean, you said something yesterday when we were chatting. You said every effort should be made first and foremost to keep the family together.
Absolutely. The removal of the child should be the measure of last resort.
Right.
Not the first option.
But we're not seeing that. But
no.
That's what it was originally established to be, correct?
Absolutely. The problem is we have a culture that's driven by fear and crisis. And because it's driven by fear and crisis, we have situations where the responsibilities, the legal responsibilities of reasonable efforts almost always fall by the wayside. It is simply set aside or only given cursory attention. We certainly do not make every effort to provide reasonable efforts before we remove. A lot of that has to do with the lack of staff.
How can the parents push them, though? Listen, this is my family. I really don't care what's going on internally. All I know is I had a family, and now I met this stranger, a.k.a. social worker. She probably didn't write the report because you got these ghostwriters that I never even had this opportunity to meet. And all I know is little Bobby and little Sarah, my children, whom I love, and I've done nothing wrong, and I didn't like the social worker, and I might have let her know, but isn't that my constitutional right to freedom of speech to say, hey, I don't like your attitude? But she actually used that against me, and I haven't seen my kids. What can I do? I'm getting ready to go to court. I'm not going to show emotion. What paperwork can I file? They've appointed this attorney to represent me, and the attorney won't return phone calls. I don't know what the hell's going on. All I know is my kids are not with me and I'm dying inside and I can't sleep and I am becoming emotionally distraught.
This is devastating. This experience absolutely cuts all of us to the core. Anybody that's gone through this. And for parents that are going through this,
What can they file? Do they need to keep this a court-appointed representative attorney? They can't afford to. Can they represent themselves in dependence? I've got all these questions. I know. And just listen. Don't wait for me to finish. Just pull right in here.
I appreciate the frustration of parents that say, I have a court-appointed attorney because I can't afford one, but I can never get a hold of them.
Right. And many. I mean, there are some good ones, but most of them they are overworked.
Absolutely, there are some good, absolutely fantastic
good and bad and
attorneys
everything.
that try their best to work with caseloads like the social workers that are absolutely inhuman, and there's no way to manage caseloads and service clients and families the way they deserve, the way they need to be serviced.
That's right.
Because these are serious issues that have
That's right.
ramifications that extend well beyond the immediate moment. When it's possible, when it's practical, when they can afford it, I'd highly recommend pursuing and seeking independent counsel support, private attorneys, paralegals, other support networks that can help family through the process. Very recently, in the last few years, we've seen a new program with the department, which I think is a good program and we should build on it, referred to as parent partners.
Okay.
And these are family members, these are parents that had kids removed but successfully reunified. These are individuals that have been through the process. These are individuals that know how to navigate because they've done it successfully and they've gotten their kids back. I highly recommend that if you have the opportunity to talk with or work with these parent partners who conduct meetings, who reach out to parents, both at the court and outside of the court, to help them understand the process, to help them understand the do's and the don'ts, and what their rights and resources might be that they can take advantage of to help them through this process. That's one resource and option that I think makes good sense. These parents have been through it. They know the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
And they made it through the process.
Social workers go in, the child gets removed. You know, there's one fabulous woman who's always on with us, and she said, can Jerry share the worst case scenarios, just a brief synopsis of a case that he saw that was just so horrific, so horrifically handled, that showed the bad part. That is the perfect example for the bad part of the system.
I worked in the system for many years, and I have many horror stories.
Give us one.
Like most of my colleagues. There's one that really sticks with me, and that it still moves me emotionally whenever I think about it and recall it. And without mentioning any names,
no names. We don't want any names.
We would never do that or
Right.
violate the confidentiality.
That's
But let me see if I could paint a picture. I was asked to be a caseworker on a case that had been in the system for a little over a year, approximately.
An existing case. Other social workers had already been on it.
Other social workers had been on it.
Okay.
Kids had been in out-of-home placement.
How many kids?
We're talking approximately 6-7 kids.
Okay.
A lot of kids. When I got the case, of course, I looked at some of the reports and I reviewed the case enough to prepare me to actually meet the family. But by that point, I had realized for several years that it was important to meet the human beings first. I didn't want to go in there with any predisposition or bias. I wanted to meet the people first. So I met the family and I started to observe the family's visits between the caregivers and the children. And one thing became very, very clear, that there was a real inconsistency in what I was observing and what I was experiencing between the caretakers and the children. I was seeing healthy, loving, viable, functional relationships that were as good as any relationships that I knew in my private life or in any other situation.
Okay.
Yet, I was seeing in the reports that I continued to read before I was assigned to the case,
Okay.
that were inconsistent with what I was seeing regarding the family and the children and these relationships.
Was it a family, husband and wife?
It was a
boyfriend and girlfriend?
It was a father and his
girlfriend.
His paternal grandparents were involved.
Okay.
He was a single parent at the time.
Okay.
And
he had custody of all the kids.
And he had custody before it was taken, and the kids were placed into custody under the jurisdiction of the Department of Children and Family Services. So I began to work with the family. I began to get to know the family. I continued to watch the family interact. In fact, I conducted visits in the office, in the family's home, and in the community. I wanted to see if there was a difference, if anything had changed, if father continued to be appropriate, loving, attentive, if the kids continue to appear bonded with the father
right.
and his grandparents who always came. I continued to watch the family, and I discovered over and over again that this was a very healthy, loving family system.
It was a big family.
It was a big family, and they were doing their best to address the situation. There were times when some of the kids would have real serious issues, but not because of the father or his grandparents, but because of the removal of the children from their caretakers.
Okay.
The father and the grandparents. I started to see symptoms manifest themselves because of the removal, not because of what was happening with the father and the grandparents. I continued to report what I saw in reports to the best of my ability.
To?
I put it into my reports, submitted it to my supervisor.
Yeah, but your supervisor then gave it to the ghostwriter.
My supervisor was not allowed to recommend what he and I saw. My supervisor.
Who stopped him? Who makes that determination that you're not allowed? I see that you think that the kids are great. They were great when they're with dad. Now they're showing symptoms of anxiety, of separation anxiety, perhaps.
Being parentified and on and on and on.
But who stops
there
that?
Was a
Who's
level,
obstructing?
There was a level above the supervisor. And I believe that there was overreach in the part of county council.
Okay. Why would they do that? What is the benefit of that? Just say it like it is. What's the benefit?
There is no benefit other than the individuals that take a position that parents are unsafe, personally feel less liability, personally feel less exposure if anything should go wrong. So I believe that...
So we're not going to take a chance.
So we're not going to take a chance.
Keep the kids apart.
And we used a just-in-case formula in practice. In the event something happens, I'm going to make sure on record it appeared as if I was ultra-conservative and not taking any chance. Sadly, tragically, what this results in, that there are removals or delayed reunification. In the case that I'm referring to, despite my best efforts to put the facts and the truth in the reports, recommendations were being ordered beyond my level, beyond my supervisor's level. And
Did you have to sign these reports?
I was forced to sign the initial reports, but it got to the point where there was even a situation where information was removed from a report, an entire section, and the level above my supervisor drafted her own interpretation of the facts, even though that person never met the family. Before I was done being involved with the case, these children tragically were returned and removed 3 times. For those family members out there that have experienced it once, you can well imagine a second and third time. The trauma that this family experienced is profound.
Yes.
The damage is profound. The family will feel this experience for generations to come. Thankfully, court eventually got tired of the legal maneuvering by the ghost authors and the individuals that made those decisions, and just returned the kids. The kids remain with the family today.
We have about 3 minutes left. Time goes so fast.
Yes.
We have a lot that we have not covered.
There's so much to cover.
I know. Maybe next week we'll continue this if your schedule won't allow, but maybe in a couple of weeks. Next week you'll be here still? I think so.
I'll be out of town the 16th, but prior to that, we can certainly do something.
Oh, yeah, we're going to.
There's so much more to talk about, Tammy.
Absolutely, I know that.
We just scratched the surface.
Wait a minute, though. Parent, oh, gosh. Tamper, what can parents do? They're going into court tomorrow. Is there anything, a petition? Is there anything that you can tell them? They're on the edge of their seat. They're listening to this show and they're saying, Jerry, give us something. You know what's happening.
Family members, to the extent you're able to, have statements, have affidavits from people that know you best. Family, extended family,
What if the court,
church
I
family.
mean, you know,
They will accept, the court will accept information that you provide that are signed affidavits and statements by your network of friends and family and people that know you best, as well as doctors, as well as mental health professionals. Have those statements, have those people appear with you. The court needs to know that you are not isolated, that you are part of a network, of a community that not only cares about you, but is there to provide support and love to those children just as you are.
Parent partners handpicked by DCFS who are generally grateful for CPS intervention. Drug abusers, for example. There was parent partners. There seems to be, within the forum, they're having some issues with parent partners.
Parent partners are not a perfect solution either, or a panacea, but you will run individuals that have at least been through the system. They can identify, they can empathize, they can provide some ideas, some suggestions of how they made it through. To that extent, that could be incredibly helpful and valuable, in addition to your own personal supports, family members.
They say they don't discuss your legal rights. They don't give you any resources. Are they obligated to do that?
The ones that I've worked with do have resources, and they do provide and talk
but is
about
it policy?
resources.
Are they obligated?
Part of their function as their job description is to provide resources, is to provide other possible support options for the families. They absolutely have that information, and to my knowledge, they try to provide it.
But if they don't, is there any recourse? Because
if they don't, they certainly can ask.
Parents, you have to ask.
You have to ask. You have to be your best advocate.
Jerry, we want to push to have posters made that we will get together and pay for and have them on the window of each and every DCFS office nationwide, not just in LA, statewide and nationwide, that gives parents some resources, gives them that opportunity, gives them a telephone number other than here so that they can understand, here's some rights, people. Don't walk into here and feel that intimidation. Your children are not with you right now, but here are some groups that can assist you, that can provide resources.
We absolutely have to do a better job of educating and arming our families so that we have a level playing field when these situations happen. You need to know your rights. You need to educate yourself. If you don't get it from a parent partner, seek out that information.
Okay. Jerry, I don't even feel like we did scratch the surface and we're done, but
we're just getting started, Tammy.
Yes.
We've just opened the discussion that needs to be continuous and ongoing.
And Jerry is going to work with us. He has made a commitment. Again, he has written this book. I encourage everybody, especially if you are in the DCFS Los Angeles County, read this book, A Culture of Fear. An inside look at the Los Angeles County's Department of Children and Family Services. He's telling a lot of stuff here, folks. He's got 18, 20 years. He is a seasoned social worker. He has a clinical background.
Tammy, could I read one last statement from the Blue Ribbon Commission finding?
Yes, thank you.
And I quote,
thank you, UBN.
Fear and liability preempts sound decision-making by the county and DCFS. Protection of the county from perceived liability at times trumps protecting children. Likewise, social worker decisions is influenced by fear and termination and liability. Fear drives the system. We have to tackle that, Tammy.
That's right. No more fear, folks. We are going to work now on providing resources, giving you the armor to go out and fight this battle, and giving you the know-how. And Jerry is really, he's adamant. He's stepped out. I met him 6 months ago or more, and when I met him, he was wearing a whistle on his neck, and he held it up and he said, we are part of this community. We care, we grieve when the community grieves, and he held it up and he was adamant about it. And unlike many other people that step up and then they step back in, you've you're staying with it, and I really honor you for that. I'm really pleased to know you and excited to work with you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, UBN, for extending this for the listeners and the folks out there and the children. We are dedicating this show because Jerry came out of Palmdale office where Gabriel Fernandez, his case was. We're going to dedicate this show to Gabriel in memory. So thank you, listeners. Thanks, folks. Folks, we may have him back on next week. We're going to have him on several times, actually. Jerry may actually become a co-host. So let's stay tuned. Thank you, folks. We love you. We love you, UBN, as usual. And we honor everybody who's taking this stand.
Thank you for listening to the National Safe Child Show on UBN Radio. For past episodes, visit the archives on ubnradio.com. And for more information, go to nationalsafechildcoalition.com.